When you're building a construction project, there's three things that you want to achieve. You want to build the project on time, on budget, and with good quality. Now, the owner wants that. The general contractor wants that. The designer wants that. The trade partners want that. Why doesn't it happen? The reason it doesn't happen is because all of those parties that are critical to that outcome are not aligned on how they're going to achieve that outcome. And they are not aligned in terms of how they're going to overcome the obstacles that inevitably occur that seek to derail the schedule, that affect the productivity, that affect the quality and the cost. My guest today is Pete Caputo. Pete is Vice President of Operations at Trubeck Construction out of the Bay Area. Now, Pete is an unusual person in the construction industry in this way. 50% of his career has been spent on the owner side of the table, and 50% of his career has been spent on the contractor's side of the table. And so he understands a construction project from both sides of the table. And he is really focused on driving project success through transparency and alignment. And that's what we talk about here today on Construction Genius. There is so much great information in this interview. If you're not driving, I encourage you to take notes because Pete's perspective is one that can be extremely helpful to you as a construction contractor, driving towards those goals of a project that is high quality, that is productive, that is on schedule, that's on budget, all those great things that we focus on every single day. Feel free to share this interview with other people who you think would benefit from it. Reach out to Pete on LinkedIn. And I really appreciate you listening to Construction Genius here today. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. All right, Pete, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Eric. It's nice to be here.
Now, Pete, you're kind of a unique creature in the world of construction.
Okay.
In that, let me explain to the audience, you have 15 years of experience on the owner's side of the business, working for a very large healthcare organization, and another 12, 13 years on the GC side of the business, working for some large contractors in the Bay Area. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's definitely correct. Little bit of played both sides.
Yeah, so it's interesting. In your experience, in your time in the industry, as you've spent time on both sides of the table, what in your mind is the number one thing that's most broken about the way construction projects are built?
I think that what's most broken is that when people hire a contractor, they immediately want to leap into action. You hire a contractor to build. And I think that's the mindset that typically gets put in there. And really, before you do anything, you have to spend some time aligning the parties on outcomes. You have to actually build a team. When you got a football team, you don't put them out there to go play the Super Bowl day one. You actually have spring training, and then you've got preseason games before you actually put your team out on the field to play the real games. And for me, I think that a lot of times we're really not as good about making sure that we're doing all the things on the teaming side of the business, aligning our outcomes so that, that the designers, the contractors, the trade partners, and the owner are aligned on getting to the right outcomes and spending time about what that is, and really partnering and really figuring out how to be on a team together as opposed to just trying to go play the game.
Okay, so let's dissect that a little bit. In your mind, who is primarily responsible for this alignment of the parties?
It's got to be the owner. I mean, the owner. Let me put it this way: the owner is the one that actually has the ability to control that more than any of the other parties, right? And so if the owner is on board with that, it makes it easier to execute it. That doesn't mean that if the owner isn't aware of it, that it's not the responsibility of the designers and the contractors to come to the table and say, hey, we need to do this. We need to figure out how to align ourselves, and we need to spend the time to do this. It's actually imperative that if it's not being done by the owner, that the contractor actually steps in and says, this is important.
Okay. So ideally it's the owner who's driving this. In your mind, what can contractors do to find or communicate this message to the owners in such a way that they embrace it and begin to see the importance of this partnering approach to building a project?
Yeah, I think that one of the ways you can do that is by really focusing on the experience of the work. How do you, when you actually kind of look forward at the end of the job, what do you want to be able to say at the end of the job? Yep, we got a building. Yep, the building's built for X number of dollars and it's built on this schedule. And you can pretty much get teams to talk about that pretty easily. But what more do you want out of this? What more do you want? Well, what I really want is that when the people move into the building, I want them to be really impressed with their workspace. I want them to feel like this is a really great place to work. I want the ability of all my designers and contractors to say, you know what? I want to go do the next building together. You know, I want to be a team and team up on the next project together. When you start getting to the more emotional side of what it is like to go through a good project, it starts to give you the basis of the kind of rules and the behaviors that you want to actually emulate throughout, you know, from the beginning of the job to the end of it.
Okay, so then time for a bit of sort of, you know, drop the mask here, Pete. I've got to ask this question because it's stuck in my head.
Yeah.
At the end of the day,
yeah,
when we've just said all that we've just said, doesn't the owner only care about spending as little as possible on getting a project built and getting it built as quickly as possible?
I absolutely think that that's the case. I think that what you have to think about though and remember is, do you want to focus on first cost or final cost? And do you want to think about value? And I think what an owner wants is value. They want to feel that, you know, they didn't pay, you know, $100 million for an $80 million building. They want to feel like they got $110 or $120 million building for $100 million, right? Well, you don't get that. You don't get that by setting people up in adversarial roles. You get that. You get that by enlisting people in the cause. You get that by getting, you know, people's discretionary effort. You know, people can choose to come to work for 8 hours a day, you know, or they can work and put that extra effort into it. You get that when you have enlisted people in the cause, when you have lined up the purpose of their building with the purpose that the people who are working on that building come to work with every day. Okay. And when you do that, you actually get a better product. You get people that are more productive. You get that result that you're talking about. You get a better project, you get a more cost-effective project, and you get it on time. And you can't do that without enlisting at the best price. The best price really is in being able to purchase that discretionary effort from the workers and the people on the job.
Okay, so this discussion then assumes that you, for instance, as the contractor, have an opportunity to have a conversation like this with the owner and the designer. So let me ask you this. In a lot of traditional sort of design build environments, you've got the designer and the owner on one side, and then the contractor and the trade partner on the other side. How is it as a contractor, how do you focus on building relationships, particularly with the architects who perhaps have been through architectural school and the first thing they heard in the first day is contractors bad, right? It's like Animal Farm, right? 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, or 2 legs bad, 4 legs good, and the contractors are the bad and the architects are the good. What do you do there?
Yeah, I think that there's more to it than that. It's not just what they've heard over, you know, when they were in architecture school or whatever. It actually gets into the fact that their experience of work is that it's that they, you don't have to do too many projects to set up that adversarial relationship and to kind of reinforce that. Right. So I think that what you're talking about is you have to build trust. Right. And how do you actually build trust? How do you get people to trust you as a contractor? How do you get the owner to trust you? How do you get the designers to trust you? And I think that really, to me, there's a lot in there that has to do with being honest, being transparent with people, making commitments and meeting commitments. There's a lot to unravel there, Eric.
Well, let's do it. Let me first ask this: what do you mean by trust? What do you mean by that word trust?
By trust, I mean that you to build trust, to have trust means that you believe in the good intentions of the person that you are working with, and that their interests, that they are not out there to do something negative to you. They are out there working in the best interest of the project.
Okay. So you believe in the good intentions of the person and that they're aligned with you in seeking the best outcomes for the projects.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So how then is trust built in your experience? And give us it from both sides of the table, please.
Okay. I'll do my best there. Well, I think first I'd like to start with the fact that if you're in a room and you were to actually ask that question, if you were to have like a kickoff meeting with an architect, the designers and the contractors and the owner all in the room, and you asked everybody to raise their hand, who wants to act in the best interest of the project for the duration of the project? I think everybody would raise their hands, sure. Right? And so I don't think you'll ever get a group of people, maybe you will, but it'd be hard to get a group of people together that wouldn't feel that way. The right. question is, how do we do that? And I think that's where everything kind of starts to diverge. And that's where trust can break down, is that people see the way to get there and the path to get there as being different. And when you have people that have a different path, and this is what's best interest of the project, and I think it's this, and I think it's that, people have to align on what that best interest is. And then they have to align on the processes and the path that they're going to take to get there. How are we going to make decisions? In every project, they talk about the trifecta, right? The perfect three. It's cost, it's quality, and it's schedule. Yes. And you have been told over and over again, you get to choose two of those, but you don't get all three, right?
Yeah.
And but if truly the goal is all three, and if you think about like a Venn diagram with those three being the circles, the center of that circle is all of those three things coming together. How do you actually get to those three things? And I think that's the conversation that you have. What processes do you put in place? And when those things start to become at odds with each other, when cost and schedule are at odds with each other, or quality and cost are at odds with each other, how as a team do we resolve ourselves to make these decisions? What information do we bring to the table? Who do we bring to the table? And then how do we actually make the right decision for the project? And those are the kinds of things that need to be talked about and set up from the very beginning of the project. On the owner side, one of the most effective ways I ever saw that done was up at UCSF on the Benioff Children's Hospital, where the owner, and I was working as the construction manager for the owner. The owner set up a daily meeting, which he had 4 out of 5 days a week. And it was specifically to bring the right people in the room to talk about the right issues at the right time and to make what I refer to as durable decisions. It's when you bring the right people in the room and you have the right information, you can actually make a decision that doesn't get unraveled. Because if it's not durable, you don't have the right people, you don't have the right information, you're more likely going to walk back on that decision, 2 weeks from now, 3 months from now. And it really makes it difficult to maintain that. And you can't keep a job moving.
Okay. So this is really good. Let's dive in a little bit here. So there was this daily meeting and it was done 4 out of 5 days, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
How long did that daily meeting last?
It lasted anywhere between an hour to 2 hours. I'd say on the front end of the project, it probably was longer. And as we actually picked up some momentum and we were able to kind of streamline the process, it probably was down more to an hour. And the reason why we broke it on Fridays, we did it Monday through Thursday, because to make people commit on a project that was 4 years long to being at a meeting every single day, at 8 o'clock, it was 8 to 9 o'clock, getting that one day a break, getting that reprieve. It was a pretty intense meeting. We had a lot of heavy discussions. It was really important to have that break for me. And it made it sure that people weren't skipping meetings during the week. It's like, if you need to miss it on Friday.
Beautiful. Okay, so let's talk about it though. So it's 1 to 2 hours, 2 hours up front, typically as you get the project rolling, 1 hour as you get into it. And then you had three parties or three aspects to it. You've got the right people discussing the right issues at the right time.
Yeah.
So in that project meeting, did the composition of the group from a people perspective change over time, or was it consistent?
The core group was consistent, and what you brought in and what flexed was subject matter experts. And so as you had different information, if you had something on the skin system, versus the interiors, you would bring different people in to talk to the core team about making decisions. What came out of that every single day was an alignment about what action we were going to take. And that action would be documented and it would be sent out to everybody. So there was clear direction of, here was the information we had. Here's why we made this decision. And this is what people are to pursue. And you had people that were senior enough, within the organizations attending those meetings so that you had people that could speak for and commit the entities to make those commitments.
Okay, so with that in mind, then who was the core group that was consistent?
You had the project executive for the general contractor,
right?
You had the project director in there for the university on that job,
right?
I sat there. I sat in those meetings every day along with them, and then you had the senior project architect in that meeting. Those were the core individuals in there.
Right.
You had people that regularly attended the meetings, which were one of the MEP project manager, because a lot of the issues dealt with MEP. So you had the MEP project manager sat in there almost every single day.
Yep.
But those were the core members that kind of needed to be there to assemble. And there were days where something came up and we'd cancel the meeting if the right people couldn't be there, because it made no sense to waste other people's time if we couldn't make decisions. It didn't make sense to have the meeting. Okay,
so take me back to one of those meetings. What was one of the toughest issues that you guys had to deal with in that meeting that was really a challenge?
Wow, you're asking me to put my way back hat on. That was 2008 to 2013 for me.
Just think the worst day of that project.
Yeah, I want to say one of the things that we did. I'm not going to answer your question directly on the issue.
No problem.
Yeah, but one of the things that we did is we agreed in that meeting to speak about the best for project solution. And we didn't completely ignore, but we tabled the financial solution to a separate forum. And by tabling the financial decision, it was like, we tried to do as much as we could, kind of get ourselves in that agnostic mindset of what is best for the project, without trying to rear up all of the financial concerns and get into the positional bargaining that happens. Yep. And that was really important. I mean, I remember that we had some really funky issues on air handlers, where we had an issue with air handlers that were leaking, right, and stuff like that we worked through as a team. I remember some issues that we had that were on in the footings when we were coming out of the ground. We had some really difficult issues on rebar congestion and things like that we were facing, and how do we resolve those things?
Okay, great. So let me. That's a very interesting thought, though. You agreed to focus in on what was best for the project and to table the financial aspects of it. So then I
Mhm.
know everyone's waving their arms right now and they're saying, hold on a second, when did we talk about the money? How did you guys handle that part?
Yeah, we had a separate weekly meeting to talk about that piece. You know, we called it the dispute alignment meeting.
That's kind of a nice little balance there. Dispute alignment.
Yes, and the acronym created the DAM meeting. So so we tried to have a little bit of fun with that. This process that we put together on that project, I've modeled on multiple projects after it. So in my time at Sutter Health, we call it the clear group meeting, the constraint list removal. So you're basically trying to get issues resolved and remove constraints on the project. And so we did that in trying to complete Sutter Medical Center Sacramento, which had been a project that had gone on for a very long time, and was having issues with project resolution. And that's one of the issues that you have when you've got a project that is that's experiencing delays, is that if you don't have a good way to resolve issues, you're not getting the job done. And so we instituted that on that. We've instituted that on a couple projects that I've been here now at Trubeck for 2.5 years, and we've instituted a constraint list removal or clear group meeting, kind of clearing the issues. We've instituted that, and it really takes on a really productive mindset in trying to resolve issues.
Can you take us inside that meeting and give us a quick snapshot of how that meeting is run? Is that secret sauce you don't want to share with the audience, or can you give us some insights?
I think the idea of that meeting is really to bring. It's not a problem solving meeting from the standpoint that you don't have a working session on things. What you have is you're bringing the information to the meeting. That team is then deciding what more information. Do we have enough information to make that decision, or do we need more information from people that aren't in the room to make the decision? Right. And so to be, to keep that meeting so that it's kind of to the point and you don't get dragged down into rabbit holes and spend too much time, you're doing that. And then when that information's ready, you say, okay, well, that information will be ready to come back to us, on Wednesday or on Thursday. So let's bring it back. Let's bring it back on that day. We're going to stop talking about it. We'll go on to the next issue. The idea is always to say, what is preventing this team from performing at their peak value? How can this team make sure that we are making sure that people are out there performing, at their peak performance, that they have the information they need, that we're providing the decisions they need to keep the work going? How do we keep that work going? How do we keep the cost down? And from time to time, we'd actually talk in those meetings about relationships that weren't working well, and potentially things that we needed to do as a leadership team to correct some of those issues.
Excellent. So just give me that framework one more time, the mindset. What can we do to give me that one more time?
Give you the issues, like, so you
what's the mindset that everyone's coming into the meeting with? What can we do to keep
the team performing at their peak?
Yes, that's it right there. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. What can we do to keep the team performing at its peak?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, if you take that concept of servant leadership, really, it's that core team. It's the leadership of the team from the different from the architect and from the designers and the owner and the contractor that are coming together to say, how do we make sure our teams are performing at their peak? How do we make sure that everybody is focused on that same goal? How do we not lose sight of that?
Okay, and just for my benefit here. You talked about the DAM meeting, the dispute alignment meeting. Is that similar to the clear meeting? What's the difference between the two?
The dispute alignment meeting would be the meeting where you talk about the money. The clear group meeting is where you talk about what's the best solution for the project. How do you get the team back on track and keep them moving?
Do you use resolution ladders in your projects?
Resolution ladders. I'm not familiar with it. No.
Well, a resolution ladder is, let's say, like I'm working on a project and I'm a PM, and on the owner's side, this is the person that I talk to when we have an issue. If we can't resolve it, it goes up to the PX, and whoever the PX's peer is, If they can't resolve it, it goes up again. Do you have anything like that?
So there's definitely a discussion about what type of issues should be at what level. But
Right.
the last thing you want to do, Eric, when you're working on something, is take an issue that could get resolved in 5 minutes and wait 3 weeks for it to go through a resolution ladder. And
Right.
so the idea of the clear group is anything that impacts the budget, the schedule, or requires a change to the documents that needs to be, documented at whatever level, depending on the kind of project it is. If it requires a change to the contract documents, you want those things to come in there. And it may be that the team refers that out and says, hey, this work group can take care of this and make that decision. But by getting more of a senior leadership weigh in on that earlier on, you actually prevent waste. You actually prevent the waste of time to getting to there. The thing that I think Stuart Ekblad, who I worked with on that UCSF job, the thing that he always was saying is, I don't want to wait 3 weeks to come up with the wrong answer and tell people to go in a different direction. I want to know about that right now.
Right. And what side of the table was Stuart on, or where was he?
Stuart's on the owner. He was the project director.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is so interesting here. Why do you think that owners and contractors struggle to establish strong relationships?
I think that there is, when you take a look at a contract, I think most of the time the contract, depending on the relationship, if you are working with an owner that is very much relationship focused and kind of says, hey, let's take the contract and throw it in a drawer, and let's work together to get the outcomes. And there are owners that do that. But more and more you find owners that are leaning on attorneys, or auditors, to enforce a contract. Right. And I've found as I've kind of grown up in this business that a contract is nothing more than a base AIA document with
right.
with everybody's biggest nightmare being then documented for the next contract. And so I had this issue with this one contractor, and so I'm going to put that in to make sure that never happens to me again. And so you get this compilation of contracts that is everybody's bad experience in contracting, because they think that the way to protect themselves is to lawyer up on how to fix that, right?
Yep.
And
it's like I just had this idea, Pete. A contract is almost like someone who gets tats for every major thing that happens in their lives, and you look at their bodies, and they're all covered with these tats that speak to all these issues. You know what I mean?
Totally, and that's what it is. It's like I'll be reading through, because when you're doing proposals, you're reading through the contracts. And I'll read some of these clauses, and I'm like, man, they got burned really bad on this one. It's like you kind of get that feeling like you're basically getting the history of the people who have been on and worked on these things through the read of the contract. And I think that's what's really hard. And so I know that from my side, what I offer, because having been on the owner's side, what I appreciated from a contractor was when they were transparent with me.
Right.
And so I try to provide that same transparency to an owner, as my offering of trust, as my kind of pathway and segue into, listen, I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm going to do the best I can to be honest with you and to tell you what's really happening. Now, for me, that can be kind of scary for some people, because how do they react to that? Is every owner ready for that? I don't know.
So what do you mean by transparency?
I think that what I mean by transparency is that you feel a level of trust where you're able to share incomplete information early and often.
What do you mean by incomplete information?
I don't know exactly what the problem is. I don't have all the data. I don't have everything I need to know to solve the problem. But I want to let you know that I found an issue in the schedule last week. My team was working on the schedule, and we found what could be a 2-month delay to the project in looking at that. I need some time to review that with my team to figure out if it's really a bust or if it's just something we think is a bust, right? And that can make an owner very nervous, right? Yes. But I would rather share that information as soon as I know it, or if we've got a financial issue on a project, and invite them into the conversation. Tell them I may need some more time to get them more information, or when I'm going to get back to them. But what I don't want them to do, I don't want to hold on to it and then have them ask me a question a month from now going, well, when did you find this? Well, I found it a month ago, and you're just telling me now, right? Then all of a sudden it seems like you're hiding something. And I think when people feel like you're hiding things, that nothing will degrade trust on a project faster than that. And you have to be willing to trust the owner and have these kinds of conversations up front. Wouldn't it be better if I told you when I found something out? Wouldn't it be better if I told you when I found it out, immediately when I found it out, and recognize that I may need a little bit more time to solve the problem? And if there's a trust on both sides, that works really well.
Right. So it's interesting because when you started talking about sharing incomplete information, the first thing that pops into my head is that if my contractor has incomplete information and I'm the owner, I'm thinking, does this person even know what they're doing? And again, I begin to,
yeah, sure.
all this fears begin to come up.
Yeah.
So and in my mind, right, because if I'm the contractor, then I don't want to come across as incompetent or like I don't know what's going on. So isn't that an incentive then, a negative incentive to keep that information for a long period of time?
Yeah, it definitely is, and that's actually what creates that mistrust and distrust that builds on a project over time, and that's why it's imperative that we figure out a way to do that, and the way you deliver information is just as important as the information you're delivering, right? And so it's not about, it's not about incompetence. It's about the fact that, projects and buildings, especially the kind of work that we do, is it's got so much coordination to it, and they're incredibly complex.
Yes.
And when you're dealing with the level of complexity of builds, you're going to, as you peel the onion, you're going to find things. I'm of a belief, and having been on the owner's side with this as well, I always appreciated when a contractor would trust me enough to know that they could give me information. I wouldn't panic. I would give them time to look at it. And if they wanted, and if I had some experience in it, I could even help or offer some assistance. There's actually times as an owner where they were really worried about something. They brought something to me. I'm like, you know what? That's not really what's important. It's really important. It's not really important that we get that done by the 15th. It's really important that this other piece is done by the 15th of the following month. And as long as you can do that, if this thing runs off track a little bit, because you had a delay with this, it's not going to be a big deal. And then I don't actually end up having someone that spent $25,000 to fix a problem that really wasn't with me. Right. And so I think that that's what it's about, and how you communicate and collaborate as a team is what really drives that type of behavior in a project.
Okay. How much transparency is too much transparency? Let's talk about it from both sides of the table. So you as the contractor, I have no problem telling me they got issues, but I don't necessarily want to hear every single issue. You know what I mean? Like TMI, when is it TMI? Sure.
Yeah. Well, I think that's different for every owner. And I think it's different for the different contractors. I think one of the things that's important is that, just like in any good relationship, you set up boundaries. I want to hear about this and I don't want to hear about that. If you have one of these issues, I've worked for owners before that say, hey, if you've got a problem with one of your trade partners, I don't care. That's your problem. I don't want to hear it. Right.
Right.
So for me, that means, okay, I got to make sure that I take care of those things in house, and they don't want to hear about my problems. And that's just that's up to an owner.
Let me ask you this. Have you ever been in a situation when you're on the GC side of the table where someone internally to your company takes this idea of transparency too far and starts throwing your trade partners and people in your company under the bus to the owner?
Wow. I can't say that I've been in that situation. I definitely think that part of that transparency is also accountability. And so if you have made a mistake, and you do make a mistake, the fact that you own that mistake, you bring it forward and you take ownership of it to say, this is what I need to do to fix it, is incredibly important. If you're not accountable and you don't come in, it's really hard. There's a lot of times where people talk about driving accountability on a project. The best kind of accountability and the way that accountability works best is not when other people are pointing out that you didn't do what you said you were going to do. It's when the people that made the commitment are able to self-identify that they made a mistake and they're coming to the table with how they're going to fix it. Right.
Okay.
And so if you've built a project where there is trust, you've also kind of broken down that concept of psychological safety for people, where they actually feel like they can come forward, that you admit your mistake if you've made it, because now you've got a whole team behind you. If I've made a mistake and it's impacting the project, the way it should be viewed is that everybody on the team is going to come together to try to help fix that mistake, right? And we're going to try to make a best for project solution. If I made that mistake in earnest, if it's not like I've just been grossly incompetent or something like that, that people are going to come and say, how can we help you? If you've built the right relationship on the project, people feel comfortable in doing that. The biggest issue you can have on a job is when someone doesn't feel comfortable coming forward to say the mistake, and all they do is try to cover it up with one more mistake and another mistake. And then you end up with a huge issue, right?
Okay, so you just came up with a phrase here I want to explore. Psychological safety. We all know about physical safety on the job. Psychological safety. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think psychological safety is covered. Google was talking. I think they did a study where they talked about what was the most important thing in high performing teams, right? And psychological safety was what was labeled there. And that means you have to provide a place where people feel comfortable making mistakes, where they know that they can speak up if they see something. You don't create an atmosphere where people feel like they have to shut up and can't say a word, they can't speak their mind. You can't set up a atmosphere where people feel like they're going to get punished. If we're all human, we all make mistakes. And you have to set up an atmosphere where people feel comfortable coming forward and either admitting a mistake or volunteering their idea because they see a problem coming. And as leaders, if we don't do that, we're really failing to provide a good environment for a team to really gel.
In your experience, what leader do you think embodies best that idea of creating a psychologically safe place?
What leader?
Do you have one in mind? Or do you have an example of someone who's done a really good job of that in terms of enabling people to feel comfortable coming forth, admitting their mistakes?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, one of the guys that I work for, Nick Para, our COO, and then his protege, Nick used to be our chief estimator, Todd Ahern, who's now the chief estimator for us. Both of those individuals, the way they ran their department, the way they work, they really do create this like psychological safety where people feel like they're empowered to say what they feel and say what they need to say. They can be themselves in their workplace. And I really feel like it comes from the fact that when you live in like a learner mindset instead of a judging mindset, you're really trying to understand and staying curious as to other people's experience and other people's point of views. And I would say that, both those individuals have always done an amazing job of doing that. I've watched it in meetings, and I've seen the way that their teams problem solve and provide solutions at a very high level.
Excellent. I think that's really important because in construction, I think what we're talking about here today, Pete, is just this tension. We've built construction projects for so long in this particular way, and now slowly, the fundamental way a project is built is beginning to change. Is that what we're really talking about here?
Yeah, I think we're all having to migrate a little bit. I think that the days of construction, having these over the top characters that would just push and drive the schedule and provide such this hard driving type sensation on a job where people just felt so stressed. I think that I'm not saying it doesn't exist anymore, but I do think that we're having to adapt, and it's really hard because the construction industry. I mean, I grew up in a construction world where that's exactly what happened. If I made a mistake, I got screamed and yelled at, just like I used to on the football field,
Yep.
And now it's like, you don't do that.
Right.
People don't respond to that type of treatment. Now, for me, if I had a superintendent that did that, it's like, okay, yep, I made a mistake, and guess what? I'd be working twice as hard to make sure I didn't make that mistake because I didn't want to get yelled at again. That doesn't represent psychological safety,
Right.
but it did represent higher performance the next time around, but we're having to supplant that concept of performance, with how do we coach people better? How do we actually get people to do that? And what we're actually transitioning to, here at Trueback is we've actually transitioned the way we actually train people. We've got to focus on technical skills, but we've also got to focus on soft skills too. And how do you actually have conversational intelligence, and how do you actually get through this conflict resolution? We're not just teaching people. You fundamentally have to learn how to build a building. That's not a choice. But how well you build that building actually has a lot to do with your ability to also incorporate those soft skills and the ability to incorporate the ability to work well on teams and to collaborate well and building high trust environments. You have to do that. And we're moving to that model, understanding that we believe that that's where the future is.
So in your mind, what are the top 3 to 5 soft skills that a construction leader must possess to be successful in the environment you're describing?
So I actually have a whole model for it, which I don't know that I'm ready to kind of go through it, but I would definitely say that you have to be able to build high performing teams. And part of that is building that psychological safety into teams.
Yep.
I would say that the focus on aligning teams on outcomes.
Yep.
And recognizing that we go for a best for project solution. And then the, I guess a third one would really be on problem solving. If you have a team that's focused on problem solving, identifying issues, and having, innovative and out of the box ways of solving those problems, I think those are the things that really make a difference. And I think that as you go through it, I've seen these things that kind of, that really tend to help people, get through jobs. And it's, putting the team together that has aligned outcomes, making durable decisions, and putting in a good, solid problem solving group of people that know how to come up with the right answers.
There's tons of good stuff in there. I'm curious about the problem solving. What's the most effective way you found to get innovative ideas from people?
The way to get one of the best ways to do that is using one of the lean techniques, using a technique called kata, which means steps. And essentially you take a look at something and you say, what's the current state, right? Without judging the current state necessarily. Where are we right now? And you allow people without trying to assess good and bad, you allow people to just kind of put it out there. What is it that's happening right now? And then you talk about a future state, which is, where do we want it to be? So if you've got a problem, okay, the beam's 2 inches off a center, okay, where do we want, but you go through these things and then you allow, people who have great technical skill and other people that maybe don't have as much technical skill, but have just some creative juices flowing. Where I have seen the best solutions come out of, it's when you've paired somebody with very little knowledge with somebody with a lot of knowledge. Because what ends up happening is neither one of them have the solution. Somebody that's very technically knowledgeable, this is the only way to fix it. Somebody that isn't encumbered with 25 years of experience, a lot of times can say, well, why don't we do it this way? And it's kind of naive and isn't founded in experience and technical knowledge. But what happens is it kicks off a thinking for the technical person to go, you know, you can't do that, but you can do this. And I have seen that work in so many cases, where you have this just incredible synergy that happens when you combine that depth of knowledge with that kind of optimism of youth. It's the intersection of those things that really gets to an out of the box and creative thought.
That right there, I think, is a very important insight. I think a good question for construction companies to ask is, how is it that we bring in those naive thinkers? And who is it from our company, or even from our trade partners, or from the owners group, whatever the case may be? How can we get those naive thinkers who do have that optimism and perhaps that out of the box perspective into those meetings? How do you guys do that?
Yeah, I think it's really easy to do because you have a group of people that just got out of college that you're typically bringing onto every job. And the one thing we don't have an issue with in construction is having a group of youthful and inexperienced people that we are trying to train up on how to do it. And it's having them in the room, either from wanting to make sure that you're putting them on a route to learn from the dialogues that are happening. I think one of the most detrimental things you can do is shut the door on some of those meetings that are happening, like at a high level. You have to let the people that have very little experience, and if you don't have a high level of psychological safety that you've created, those people won't speak up, and you need to figure out how to elicit a response from them, because sometimes the best ideas come from them.
Yeah, and if you've got a crusty, proud ego where you don't want to hear from young people because they're snotty nosed and spend too much time on their phones, then you're tripping as well, and you're missing out.
Yeah, no, there's a lot to that. I probably get criticized more than anybody for being on my phone, and I'm on the other end of that technology generation. I should be one of those people that aren't, but I definitely see that some of those brightest ideas are coming from those people. You know, the other thing is we got to realize young people have come up in an age where whether it's social media or whatever else, the amount of inputs that they actually have in their brain far exceeds anything I experienced, in my adolescence and early adulthood.
Yeah. And
the ability to process, different points of information fast. Mm-hmm. They're incredibly good at that. They can take things just because that's kind of how they got brought up, with having all these different sources of information. They've got they're texting. They've got 3 different apps that they're texting off of, WhatsApp and Slack and all these all these different things they're texting on. They've got stuff going off on their phones. They've got stuff going off everywhere, watches, and they're able to actually kind of, multitask better than I would. Some people tell you that's a total myth and you can't really do things effectively. But I watch these folks that have grown up in that, and it's like you can just take all this information coming in from different inputs and synergize them. And you see that happen a lot more.
So I think that's one of the arts of leadership in the current environment then is balancing. You got your 25-year veteran with the technical skills. You've got your incoming naive folks, but they've got these new perspectives. And you as the leader, you've got to be able to balance those two sides of the equation, so to speak, and draw the best ideas out of both of them.
On a schedule and a budget.
Yeah. Interesting. interesting. And
Yeah,
I tell you, we've hit some great things here today, Pete. I know I have a feeling that we could go on for quite a bit longer, so I'm going to have to get you on for round two.
sure.
As we're wrapping up here, give me a quick summary here. If you're, let's just go from the contractor side of the table. Top three things that you would encourage a contractor to do, top three steps right away in order to ensure a better project outcome on whatever projects they're working on.
Yeah, I would encourage them to start the dialogue with an owner early about the experience of the project. How do you want this project to turn out? I think that is where I would really focus it, and then that really starts focusing you on aligning on outcomes. I would actually say, what if we took the contract and we threw it out for right now? How do we want to behave if we were constructing the rules, and then come back and say, how do we actually fit that in under the current umbrella that we have, right? And I think that's like, get yourself out of your current mindset, get outside the box to actually say, what does this really need to be successful? And I think if you can do that, and you can have those, heartfelt and earnest conversations with the owner, I believe most owners will listen. As an owner, for a long time, you definitely wanted to have those conversations. They were a little bit, new territory sometimes, but man, when you have them, and you get through a project where you've actually executed on it, there's no better feeling than having come through the other side of that. And I think that the projects where I have done that on have been the ones that have been most successful, where I've taken that time to develop the team and to work as part of that team, and stay true to those things. That's where I've seen the most predictable results and the best results on the project, and where you want to pick up and go do the next one with the same team.
That's excellent.
Can't wait to work in.
So that's another great perspective, just as we finish here, is that it's not just this project you're building on. You're playing long-term games with long-term people. And so you want to think about, how is this going to impact the next project and the next project down the road?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
And
go ahead, please.
Eric, the other thing I want to tell you is, I can tell you, having gone through this, I have never once been perfect in my execution on any of these things and on delivering on these things. And I don't want to represent the fact that I've got this down. I mean, it is an effort and a work every single day to get better at doing these things, and to behaving these ways and stuff like that. I got brought up in an industry, and in a time where a lot of the things I talk about were completely contrary to the way that I think we ought to be doing things now. So it's an effort. You can't do this by chance. It actually takes work. It actually takes time, and you got to put that time in there.
Yes, I appreciate you sharing that, Pete. Excellent. Well, as we wrap up here, a question I like to ask my guests. You're there in the Bay Area.
Yes.
Yeah. We are, as we're recording this, we are opening up from the lockdown. Our dear leader, Mr. Newsom, is giving us grace to go to the restaurants again. So with that in mind, what's your favorite restaurant? Give us a restaurant recommendation.
My favorite restaurant? My favorite restaurant is actually in Sacramento. It's a restaurant called The Kitchen.
The Kitchen. Okay. So you got to give me your. Can I give you my kitchen story?
Okay, sure.
Okay, so I went to the kitchen with the wife. It was great, but the problem was I ate too much early on. So by the time the third and fourth course came, I was done. I wandered around the kitchen and ate all this food, and I was stuffed. How do you handle yourself at the kitchen and maximize the experience?
Yeah, well, you definitely have to plan for the different courses, and you have to make sure, because I think what you were talking about, walking around the kitchen, that's intermission, right?
Yeah.
They call it intermission. Intermission is not a break from eating. It is actually the potentially heaviest part of eating, right?
Right.
I typically make sure that I eat very lean for several days before, so that I bring the appropriate appetite. One of the things I love about there is, like, if you say that you really love something, like they served a course and like, that was amazing. I had this asparagus soup one time that was just out of this world. One time a fried green tomato, they'll make you another one. Yep. It's like, so it's like there's no end to it. And so it is just the most fantastic dining experience. And if anybody has a chance, going out there and eating at the kitchen is just phenomenal.
Right. So everyone in Sacramento, they know what we're talking about. If you are in the Bay Area, it is worth the trip. So we're going to put a link in the show notes to the kitchen. Make sure that you make it an event. And like Pete so wisely said, eat lean for a number of days before you get there.
Yeah. And if you can get a seat at the counter, to me, the counter is just a phenomenal experience. If you can request to sit up at the counter, with the whole show kitchen, it's amazing. Really fun time. Yeah.
Excellent. And by the way, if you Google it and you get put off by the location, don't be put off by the location. The location's a little leaky, but the actual experience itself is awesome.
I drove the first time I went there. I drove by it 3 times before I actually pulled in, because I'm like, this can't be it. This can't.
No, it can't be it. It's right by
this can't be it. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Cool.
Yeah.
Pete, dude, I really enjoyed this interview. Thank you for your generosity and your time, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
All right. Sounds great. Thanks.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Yep. Bye.
Today's episode was brought to you by the Construction Conclave. If you as a construction leader would like to develop your skills and get involved in a community of like-minded construction professionals who are focused on building healthy teams, profitable projects, and long-term successful businesses, then the Construction Conclave is for you. It's a private, invitation-only group of construction leaders that are focused on developing their leadership skills. We do training every single month online that looks at how to become a better leader in a very practical, straightforward way. We also have other events that build community and camaraderie so that you can associate with others who are interested in developing their skills as leaders. If you'd like more information and to see if you qualify for participating in the conclave, feel free to reach out to me, eric@ericanderton.com. Thank you for listening to this episode of Construction Genius. Hope you found that 1% of inspiration to help you in the next few days. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review on iTunes, share it with other construction leaders who you think would benefit, and thanks again for listening.